Hare Krishna, Anjali Mataji. Okay, Mataji, we're live on YouTube and ready to get started.
Thank you, Radhika. So, dear devotees, really excited to be here today and cover a very, very important chapter in the Bhagavatam, and that is the prayers by Queen Kunti and Parikshit saved. This is chapter 8 of Canto 1. So, just a little summary of what happened in the last chapter and how the story is unfolding. So, in the last chapter, we heard how Drona, the son of Dronacharya, he had thrown the Brahmastra and killed the 5 sleeping sons of Draupadi. When Arjuna started chasing him, out of desperation, he threw the Brahmastra. He did not know how to retract the Brahmastra, and Arjuna, with Krishna's help, foiled the weapon with his own Brahmastra. This way, the living entities in the world were relieved from the heat of the nuclear weapon. And this weapon, we discussed how this weapon was so special because, unlike the modern atomic weapons, is that it worked solely on chanting of Vedic mantras and it would hit only the target. However, Ashwatthama, he did not know how to retract that. He hadn't learned the complete art. Now, following this amazing feat by Arjuna, there was a wonderful, thoughtful exchange between Krishna, Arjuna, and Draupadi regarding the fate of Ashwatthama, whether he should be killed or not killed. The Pandavas, except Bhima, they did not want Ashwatthama killed, but Krishna wanted him to be killed, but also not killed. So Arjuna found a perfect solution, satisfying everyone by killing and not killing. What did he do? He cut the part of the hair of Ashwatthama and plucked the jewel from his head and let him go. So this chapter we will begins actually with a sad scene that occurs when members of the Kauravas from both sides went to the Ganges to deliver water and pay respects to their dead relatives. They were engulfed in overwhelming grief, and Krishna pacifies them with words of wisdom, and then he prepares to leave Hastinapur for Dwarka, where all the devotees have been waiting for him for a long time. And this is interesting because here we see Krishna sitting on the chariot, not as a chariot driver of Arjuna, but for the first time we see him sitting and as a passenger. He has Daruka ride the chariot for him, and he's sitting as a passenger and heading to Dwarka. Now you can imagine the scene, how the citizens are feeling with Krishna leaving. And as he's getting ready to leave, and taking leave of everyone, what happens is Uttara comes running to Krishna. And why? Because Ashwatthama has thrown another Brahmastra at the embryo. Uttara is pregnant and she has a child within her womb, and the Brahmastra is aiming towards her womb, and also towards the Pandavas who are with Krishna. And so this Brahmastra is coming, and and Krishna, he sees that the Pandavas are in great danger and that actually there's not enough time for them to counteract that weapon. So Krishna has a dilemma that he has to solve very quickly. And the dilemma is that, whether he should pick up weapons. Even though the war has actually technically, ended, but not really. And so Krishna, if he picked up the weapons, then he would be breaking his promise. So Krishna really, he does pick up his weapon, his Sudarshan disc, because for him, breaking a promise, which is on the level of some moralistic endeavor, mundane morality, was lesser compared to his promise of protecting devotees. So he throws his disc and neutralizes the Brahmastra to save the Pandavas and also the little child within the womb of Uttara. So again, we see Krishna here as Bhakta Vatsala, a protector of his devotees, who's willing to break his promise to give protection to his devotees. So now I will read a few verses and prayers by Uttara and the saving of Parikshit Maharaj. So, so I'll read one verse, and this is the verse for text 8. Uttara uvacha pahi pahi mahayogan deva deva jagatpate nanyam tvad abhayam pashye yatra mrityu parasparam. Uttara said, O Lord of Lords, Lord of the universe, you're the greatest of mystics. Please protect me, for there is no one else who can save me from the clutches of death in this world of duality. Text 10. Oh my Lord, you're all powerful. A fiery iron arrow is coming towards me fast. My Lord, let it burn me personally, if you so desire, but please do not let it burn and abort my embryo. Please do me this favor, my Lord. Sutta Goswami said, having patiently heard her words, Shri Krishna, who is always very affectionate to his devotees, could at once understand that Ashwatthama, the son of Dronacharya, had thrown the Brahmastra to finish the last life in the Pandava family. O foremost among the great thinkers, Munis, Shaunaka, seeing the glaring Brahmastra proceeding towards them, the Pandavas took up their 5 respective weapons. The almighty personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, having observed that a great danger was befalling his unalloyed devotees, who were fully surrendered souls, at once took up his Sudarshan disc to protect them. The Lord of Supreme Mysticism, Sri Krishna, resides within everyone's heart as a Paramatma. As such, just to protect the progeny of the Kuru dynasty, he covered the embryo of Uttara by his personal energy. So Krishna's mission was finally done. He had protected Parikshit, and more about protecting Parikshit and how he went in, and the beautiful form that Parikshit Maharaj saw will be given in the 12th chapter. So just a little mention is given in this chapter. So we won't go very deeply into the story now. But after this, after Krishna had saved both the Pandavas and Parikshit Maharaj, then the little child Parikshit within Uttara's womb, then his mission was done, and it was time for him to head back. And when we think about Krishna's dealings with the Pandavas, as to when Krishna first came to help the Pandavas, was when the Pandavas were in exile, when he came for the first time to Hastinapur. And since that time, after he came, Krishna was trying to make peace with the Kauravas, to try to avert war. And Yudhishthir also sent a message to the Kauravas to the extent saying that if you cannot give us half the kingdom, then at least give us 5 villages, at least spare that for us. But of course, Kauravas, who were full of malice, especially Duryodhan, said that land where you could drive a pin through, even that much land, I don't have, I'm not going to give you. So now, look at the difference. Now we see the complete difference here. Due to Krishna's intervention, Pandavas had the whole world to rule. Before they were living in disguise, and now they had conquered the 4 directions. Now Krishna is heading back to Dwarka. And But not just yet. What's happening here? Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas, she comes running to Krishna and she stops Krishna. And what this chapter is about are the beautiful prayers by Queen Kunti, uh, and more about her prayers and the caliber for devotees, of her being a devotee. I will do that in another slide. But Kunti, she rushes to Krishna and she offers her prayers. And in the first slide, I will talk about how Kunti is referred to as chaste. Is described as sati or chaste. And what exactly does chaste mean here? Why is she called a chaste woman? And Prabhupada describes in the purport, which I will read here for you, Kunti is described here as sati or chaste due to her unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. Her mind will now be expressed in the following prayers for Lord Krishna. A chaste devotee of the Lord does not look to others, namely other living being or demigod, even for deliverance from danger. That was all along the characteristic of the whole family of the Pandavas. They knew nothing except Krishna, and therefore the Lord was always ready to help them in all respects and in all circumstances. That is the transcendental nature of the Lord. He reciprocates the dependence of the devotee. One should not, therefore, look for help from the imperfect living beings or demigods, but one should look for help from Lord Krishna, who is competent to save his devotees. Such a chaste devotee also never asks the Lord for help, but the Lord, out of his own accord, is always anxious to render help anxious to render it. Okay, so now we'll begin with the first prayer of Queen Kunti. Beautiful prayer. That is text 18. Kunti vacha namase purusham tvadyam ishwaram prakate param alakshyam sarvabhutanam antarbahir avisthitam. Srimati Kunti said, O Krishna, I offer my obeisances unto you because you are the original personality and are unaffected by the qualities of the material world. You are existing both within and without everything, yet you are invisible to all. So the two important things that she's mentioning here, which is inconceivable. In other words, it's a paradox. Why she's saying that how Krishna is existing inside but also outside, but yet he's invisible to all. Okay, so she's offering respects to Krishna as a nephew, as a supreme Lord, but actually he's a nephew. She's actually in a very superior position, Kunti, right? And Krishna should be offering respects to her. So she calls. She's really puzzled, and what is she saying is that, how he entered the womb of Uttara, yet he was sitting outside on the chariot. And she's watching that because when Uttara comes asking for help, Krishna enters her womb and saves Parikshit. So she's very, very puzzled that how is it that she's localized, but yet he's all pervading. So she was puzzled. And the example that Prabhupada gives, that if you take a piece of paper and we shred it to pieces, then that original paper doesn't exist anymore. In other words, it's either all pervading or it's localized. It cannot be both. Materially speaking, it cannot be both. And also, if it exists in one place, then it cannot exist in another place. In other words, materially, everything is limited. Even form is limited. And then she says how even though Krishna is everywhere, he's all pervading, yet he's invisible. Why? It's because of the curtain of Maya that Krishna places before conditioned souls until they are purified enough to see him. And he's described as, the example that's given, a nice analogy that's given, is that of an actor, how he dresses up and he cannot be recognized as to who really he is. And to a foolish child, here Prabhupada writes that how he or she may think, oh, this is really Indra who's who's doing this show, who's speaking, right? Or this is what a gopi, or that's a hill. No, but the actor is simply acting. So, in the same way, a foolish, conditioned soul, he does not know who Krishna is. Why? Because Krishna covers that the vision of that person, of that soul, um, and we cannot see him, and that's mainly because of our envy of Krishna. So, and in the same purport, Prabhupada explains how that is why we should have temples and mosques and all these places of worship, because ordinary people really cannot see Krishna, because Krishna covers them by the deluding potency. But they can see the deities and hear from Shastras. So he speaks very vehemently against those who decry the places of worship. He said that how advanced souls, they can come and serve in the temple, but for lesser advanced, they can simply come and see the deities and advance. So in the next slide, Kunti Devi calls herself less intelligent. She says that, Krishna, you came to give this message to the advanced souls, to the Paramahansas. Your message is for them. I am so unqualified. How can I understand these things? What does she say? You yourself descend to propagate the transcendental science of devotional service unto the hearts of the advanced transcendentalists and mental speculators who are purified by being able to discriminate between matter and spirit. How then can we women know you perfectly? So she's saying that this knowledge has been imparted to munis who are pure-hearted, who can distinguish between matter and spirit. And you have come to give them devotional service to personalities like that. But what about us? So really, Kunti Devi is showing her humility. We know that she's the most intelligent. Her prayers are recited by Paramahansas. But here Prabhupada is saying that she's teaching us the right mentality, and how should we make ourselves qualified to see Krishna. And then Prabhupada goes on to explain how even the great yogis, mystic yogis and speculators, they cannot understand Krishna. And in the second canto, they talk about the yogis, how they can leave their bodies through their practices of yoga, and they can travel everywhere. And even the more serious ones, they can go all the way to Brahmaloka through the sunbeams, and they can wait till the universe is finished and transfer them to Goloka. So, but how easy it is through the process of chanting. And therefore, chanting becomes an easy way for all conditioned souls who, in this time and age, are all less intelligent. So, so here I was thinking that just to talk a little bit about Kunti Devi and her greatness, and how Prabhupada saw Kunti Devi and what he thought about her prayers. Now, Brahmananda, one of the early disciples of Prabhupada, he, in one of the early Back to Godhead magazine, not very early, it was 2014, he wrote about his encounter with Prabhupada during the early days when Prabhupada first came to America in 1965 and 66, how one time he got really sick, and it was in 67, and he got really, really sick to the point that they did not know. It was a Memorial Day and there was no doctor available, and he actually got a stroke. And the devotees were very desperate and they didn't know what to do. And at that time, Prabhupada, extremely ill, he asked Brahmananda to recite him the prayers of Queen Kunti to him. And Brahmananda writes about his experience, how he didn't even know how to read the Sanskrit, and it was such a struggle, but Prabhupada really appreciated that. And another time when Prabhupada was again sick, and it was in, not sure, but 1973, he had a really bout of bad sickness where he had fever for like 105 degrees. Again, many doctors came, and Ayurvedic doctors, allopathic doctors, they came to look at Prabhupada, and none of them could really ascertain what was wrong. So Prabhupada asked for three things. It almost seemed like he was leaving his body, and he asked for three things. And one was a picture of Lord Nishingadev in front of him that was recently painted. And then he asked for the devotees to be chanting the Maha Mantra. And then he asked again Brahmananda to recite Kunti's prayers. So, and then later on in 1973 in New York, Prabhupada started giving classes, a series of classes on these prayers by Queen Kunti, extensive classes, lectures on them. And he continued those classes when he went to Los Angeles. And later on, he asked the BBT to make a book from these on these lectures. And that's why we have this beautiful book by Srila Prabhupada, the prayers of Queen Kunti. At that time, there was a devotee who did the first videotape of Srila Prabhupada. So, and this was in black and white, and you may have seen it. The only time that we get to see Prabhupada giving a series of lectures is when he was reciting, when he was explaining these beautiful verses. So, these prayers by Queen Kunti, they are very, 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 very advanced, and they are immortalized forever in the Mahabharata and Bhagavad Puran, and they have been recited and chanted and sung for years and years, thousands of years, by sages, by philosophers. So, so we know that who Kunti Devi is and how wonderful these prayers. And actually, Prabhupada encouraged devotees to recite her prayers, and to meditate on them, and especially in times of difficulty. We know the story of Kunti Devi in the Mahabharata and the types of tribulations she went through, and how her faith in Krishna never ever wavered. And that's those are the feelings that we're going to hear in these prayers. These are heartfelt prayers of our deep realization of Krishna. So in the next slide, Kunti Devi favors Lord Krishna's descent over others. So I'll read this beautiful Sanskrit verse. This is text 21, by the way. Krishnaye Vasudevaye Devaki Nandanaya cha Nanda Gopal Kumaraya Govindaye Namo Nama. Let me therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto the Lord, who has become the son of Vasudeva, the pleasure of Devaki, the boy of Nanda, and the other cowherd men of Vrindavan, and the enlivener of the cows and senses. So here Kunti is giving the names of Krishna, which is telling about Krishna's relationship to his beloved devotees. It is not only that we see Krishna as a master and we are the servant, but we should also see him with his dealings with his devotees. Actually, it says that one can understand the stature of a devotee, like in the Srimad Bhagavatam, by the way Krishna shows his intimacy with that devotee. So naturally, Krishna's intimate pastimes with his devotees in Vrindavan is naturally the highest of all. So he's most approachable in that relationship, because Krishna is not approachable by any material things, any material assets, like how much money, how rich we are, how much money we have in the bank, with our abilities, by our character, beauty, or good qualities. But we may have all these assets, but none of them are enough to approach Krishna. None of them, Prabhupada says, will give us a ticket to see Krishna. And Krishna is not going to lift this curtain of Maya by these things. What is going to work is when we do bhakti, when we do loving devotional service to him. So Queen Kunti here adores the descent of the Lord above all other, of the Lord as Krishna above all other incarnations, because in this incarnation, he's very approachable. And unlike, he gives the example, unlike the incarnation of Lord Ram. Why? Because Lord Ram is a king's son. So naturally, there's a certain formality, and only very few people could actually go and see him. And therefore, it is said that devotees of Mathura, Vrindavan, and Dwarka, they are very much more fortunate than devotees in Mathura, for example, right? Or devotees in Vaikuntha. So now in the next slide, Kunti Devi compares Krishna with a lotus flower. Again, a beautiful verse that I will recite. Nama pankaja nabhaya, nama pankaja maline, nama pankaja netraya, namaste pankaja janagrahe. My respectful obeisances are unto you, O Lord, whose abdomen is marked with a depression like a lotus flower, who are always decorated with garlands of lotus flowers, whose glance is as cool as the lotus, and whose feet are engraved with lotuses. So again, in the last chapter also we compared Krishna with the lotus. So here Kunti Devi is giving more details of why Krishna looks like a lotus, because his navel is known as is called is described as a lotus, and from that lotus a lotus flower came out, a lotus stem with a flower on which Brahma was born, and then he wears a garland of lotus flowers, and his eyes are like lotus petals which come almost to the ears. He possesses lotus feet, and one of the marks on his feet is a lotus flower. And Prabhupada explains how actually the lotus flower is actually above the water. In the same way, Krishna's lotus feet is above the material world. Why? Because he doesn't take even one step out of Golok, Vrindavan, Mathura, or Dwarka. His glance is as cool as a lotus. Now, lotus flower is something so beautiful, but it grows out of mud. Similarly, Krishna appears to be of this material world to speculators, but actually he's not part of this. He's completely transcendental. Prabhupada explains in the purport how when one sees the Lord, one should see from the feet, beginning from the feet to the waist, and then to the chest, and then to the face. But Kunti Devi, instead of starting with the feet, she starts with the waist of Krishna. Why? Because she knew that if she did that, started from the feet, that would embarrass Krishna, because Krishna was her nephew. To save him from the embarrassment, she actually starts from the abdomen. Now, in the next slide, Kunti Devi is going to show her gratefulness to Krishna for saving her family and her from all the calamities. And she recites all these calamities that they went through, that Krishna saved her from. She says, O Rishikesha, master of the senses, and Lord of lords, you have released your mother Devaki, who was long imprisoned and distressed by the envious king Kansa, and me and my children from a series of constant dangers. Here Kunti Devi gives specific examples how Krishna saved the Pandavas. And one by one, for example, she talks about how they were saved from a great fire and poisoned cake that Bhima got, and then from cannibals, man-eating, demons, and of course the incident of Draupadi, how the Kauravas were trying to strip her naked, and then they were cheated in gambling, of course, and then of course many other calamities, one after another. So she went through a lot of suffering, and at every step Krishna saved them. Now it's interesting that how Krishna saved Kunti far more than Devaki. Now Devaki was in the prison house and she was saved right very, very much later. But how Kunti was saved by Krishna at every step in her life, whenever there was danger. Why? Because Prabhupada writes how Kunti Devi was a widow. She had no shelter of her husband. But Devaki did have a husband. So how Krishna gives more favor to a devotee who's in more danger. Sometimes, of course, Krishna puts the devotee in danger. And in that state of helplessness, the devotee becomes more attached to the Lord. And the more attached he becomes, the more success he has. So in this way, Krishna sometimes takes away everything from a devotee and leaving nothing except himself. And we see that in the story of Prabhupada, when he was going on the ship to come to America, there was nobody to see him off. In that beautiful poem Prabhupada writes, nobody, no family member, nobody. He went alone. Everybody had abandoned him, right? And even when he came to America, he had practically no one. After he left his family, the sponsor family in Butler, Pennsylvania, and he came to New York, he went through extreme hardship. In fact, he was in this place, a small office-like place in New York, when he came straight from Butler. And And there was, in this little office, there was actually no shower and no kitchen. So he would walk 7 blocks to Dr. Mishra's place to cook and to shower. And this place was 7 blocks away. So in the freezing cold of the winter, Prabhupada would walk, and he had clothes which were really meant for tropical climate, not like New York harsh winter. So Prabhupada, he went many difficulties, and he, in those times, he had only Krishna. So in this way, Krishna, he may take everything away from a devotee, just so he brings the devotee closer, and also mainly to teach us. We get so much inspiration from hearing of Srila Prabhupada's, early struggles, and how he kept his faith and never let it waver. But interesting thing is that how Kunti, after praising, glorifying Krishna, that he had saved the family from all types of difficulties and calamities, she's asking the Lord, praying to the Lord that those calamities come again and again. And that really comes as a shock. That finally she gets over those calamities, and she's saying, Krishna, you give me that if it means that I can keep you here. Because she understands that Krishna's work is finished. He's relieved. He wanted Yudhishthira Maharaj to go on the throne, the Pandavas to rule because they were virtuous. Now he's done that. So he's leaving. So she's very, very distressed. And she's saying, if it means that when we have calamities, you're going to stay, you're going to be with us, then let these calamities come again and again. Because by getting those calamities, we will see you. And seeing you means I will not have to take birth and death again. And then Prabhupada's beautiful purport, in which he describes the very nature of this material world, how it's full of calamities. And the key thing is not to be disturbed by these calamities. And he goes on to explain how the spirit soul is transcendental to all these calamities. And it's quite unreal. Just like a man may see a tiger, in a dream, and he may cry out, but there is no tiger. So in the same way, we have these difficulties and calamities, but really the soul is not experiencing those difficulties. This is just temporary, which is going to go away. It's just not going to be there forever. It's not eternal. So in this same way, for devotional service, when we focus our life on devotional service, it's all gain, whereas anything material is temporary, because it will be taken away from us. So Prabhupada writes how for a non-devotee, everything is a loss, whether he gains and he's happy or whether he loses. Because if he gains, then he becomes very entangled and he becomes attached. But for a devotee, everything is a gain, because he has Krishna. He has Krishna. Why? Because he holds on to the lotus feet of Krishna very, very tightly. So in this way, Kunti Devi is asking for Krishna's association. Now, in the next slide, Kunti Devi prays to Krishna, glorifies Krishna and say, who can actually understand Krishna and who cannot understand Krishna? Who can know Krishna and who cannot know Krishna? So I'll read the translation. My Lord, your Lordship can easily be approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted. One who is on the path of material progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, and bodily beauty cannot approach you with sincere feeling. My obeisance to you, my Lord. My obeisances are unto you, who are the property of the materially impoverished. You have nothing to do with the actions and reactions of the material modes of nature. You are self-satisfied, and therefore you're the most gentle and the master of the monists. So only who can be really gentle are those who are self-satisfied. This I thought was very interesting, that really being gentle, being free of all agitation means one is self-satisfied. So here Kunti Devi points out that what is wrong with all these other material assets, What is wrong with having a good birth, great wealth, beauty, knowledge? Because these can be factors for great pride if we are not careful. Of course, if we engage these very things in Krishna's service, then one can remain protected. Because it makes us intoxicated, and we see that in the world today. Just about the whole material world revolves around these five assets. So much money goes into these areas, right? For example, money that's poured into trying to become beautiful, right? The anti-aging, things that they have out there, right? So the whole world is revolving around these four assets, which becomes a discredit in our bhakti process towards Krishna. So in the next slide, we'll Kunti Devi, beautiful verses here where Kunti Devi is describing how Krishna's pastimes are inconceivable and bewildering. And that's very interesting because how Krishna is, achintya, he's inconceivable. And why? Because she mentions how Krishna, you work, but yet you're inactive. You take birth, yet you're unborn. And then you are such a great personality, yet you allow yourself, submit yourself to take birth among animals and aquatics and do your Nara Leela, which means like human-like activities. And she finds this very, very bewildering. Now in text 31, but among all these things, what is most bewildering to her, she will explain that in text 31. She says, my dear Krishna, Yashoda took a rope to bind you when you committed an offense, and your perturbed eyes overflooded with tears, which washed the mascara from your eyes. And you were afraid, though fear personified is afraid of you. This sight is bewildering to me. So Kunti Devi is saying that it is bewildering when you come among animals, take birth in the form of animals, For example, you came as Matsya, the fish, and as a boar, a hog, right? He even came as a, as a sage, Narayan. Nara was Arjuna, Narayan, who did austerities, Krishna doing austerities. Right? So all this becomes very contradictory and bewildering to her. But more astounding and bewildering was when Krishna came as little Krishna, the son of Mother Yashoda. Why? Because he allows his mother to chastise, and he's afraid of her, when actually he's fear himself, he's fear personified himself. And tears are coming from his eyes out of fear, and mascara from his eyes is running. Yet he's unborn, he's all-pervading, and he's supreme. He's the controller, yet he's crying out of fear. So Kunti Devi is stumped. And so she understands. So that's why she appreciates this form of Krishna as a child. And therefore the pastimes of the Lord as son of Mother Yashoda is glorified throughout the ages, has been glorified throughout the ages. Because in this form, Krishna is controlled by the love of his devotee, the gopis and Mother Yashoda. Prabhupada writes in the purport how this is the full and glorious explanation of who God is. Otherwise, generally people think that God means he's the master and I'm the servant. And he simply awards justice. So if you've been bad, you're going to be given punishment. And if you've done good, okay, here's some money. Right? If you're bad, okay, you're going to trip and fall. But in this situation, if you see God only like that, there's really no mercy. There's no love. And he doesn't become all attractive. But when we see the Lord as being controlled by his devotees, being subservient to the love of his devotees, then naturally his position becomes glorified. And we can understand Krishna in full. This is who Krishna is. And this is what makes him all attractive. So she's appreciating Krishna's role in Vrindavan. as being the higher than any other incarnation or role. So, and in the next chapter, actually, Bhishma Dev, the prayers of Bhishma Dev, also he says the same thing, how he glorifies Krishna's Leela in Vrindavan and his relationship with the gopis. So the interesting point is that a devotee may be in any different rasa, but he has a good sense of where who Krishna is most intimate with. And he really appreciates that. So in the next slide, we're going to talk about Kunti Devi is going to give the reasons why Krishna comes, which becomes a very nice point, kind of a little summary of the Bhagavad, what is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. And the reasons that she says is seen here. He removes burden of the earth, and we see that in the first chapter of 10th Canto, how Bhumi Devi is asking for help from Brahma because the earth has become overburdened by many demoniac people. Then Krishna comes to establish religious principles that he does, when he saves the Pandavas and puts them on the throne. He's establishing religious principles. Then he kills the envious and protects devotees. Also, another reason is that Devaki and Vasudeva prayed for a son. So he came to please them. And then, but last of all, the last reason, where Kunti Devi explains that how Krishna comes to rejuvenate the process of hearing and chanting. That is the most important reason why Krishna comes. Because this is the only thing that will give us peace of mind and give us love of God. Right? There's so much stress today, right, that we all experience. Just living in this material world is a reason to be stressed, right? And go through these material pangs. And pangs, what are pangs? It's just frustration, anger, illusion, Prabhupada calls them. These are such stresses in our life. And Krishna, by introducing the process of hearing and chanting, he's helping us relieve through that. And of course, especially in the form of Lord Chaitanya. So now Kunti Devi, so far she's been glorifying Krishna, right? And now she's asking for something. She's asking for a humble request. She's asking Krishna not to leave the Pandavas. Why? Because she's saying there's no one to protect us. Of course, Kunti Devi is not on that material platform where she's asking for physical protection. She's really asking for Krishna's association because she's of the highest caliber and she's in separation already from Krishna even before he leaves. Right? But of course she pleads in a way that if I can explain to Krishna why he should not go, maybe he will stay. So she's pointing out that Krishna, I know you were here when we had difficulties, but those difficulties haven't gone away. Even though the Pandavas are, established on the throne, but we've made, due to this war in which 640 million people were killed, we've made a lot of enemies. And in war, when people when people are killed, then the dependents of those people, they become very angry and they want to take revenge. And this is a very outcome of a war. The scars never go away, actually. And she's explaining how the world is full of danger, and how we need Krishna. So this is what the point that Prabhupada makes, is that the world is full of danger, and we must increase our dependency on Krishna. Even though we have to work with valor. In other words, we don't stop doing our prescribed duty, but we do our duty, but at the same time depend on Krishna. And there is such a good, Arjuna provided such a good example. He was a warrior, a fighter. He was on the front lines, but yet he totally depended on the mercy of the Lord. Interesting point that Prabhupada makes here, how people who don't depend on Krishna, they're called anath, which means an orphan. And people who do depend on Krishna are called sanat. So one should learn how to be dependent on Krishna while we do what we need to do. Right? So in these verses, we see the separation, and which we are going to see further in the next chapter, separation of devotees from the Lord. In other words, the intensity of love for Krishna is unparalleled. Prabhupada described the separation of pure devotees like the Pandavas for Krishna is like the separation of fish from water. I don't know if anybody has seen a fish out of water. It's terrible, right? So Kunti Devi is like all the Pandavas are there when she's offering these prayers, and they're just like Krishna is leaving. It's like a thunderbolt has hit them, right? So they're experiencing that separation, and these are reflected in these beautiful prayers by Kunti Devi. And Kunti Devi, Prabhupada explains, her dilemma is what to do, whether if she stops Krishna from going, then the Vrishnis, the Dwarkavasis, they will be bereft of Krishna's association. And if she allows him to go, then the Pandavas are bereft from his association. So she's kind of torn between the two. And that's why in the next verse, in text 40, I think, 41, she asks Krishna to sever her relationship with her family. And Prabhupada explains severing means that just the physical attachment that she feels torn, but that she wants to not, because she wants her mind to be totally focused on Krishna, and undisturbed. She wants to be rid of this familial relationships so that it doesn't come in the way. Beautiful prayers here. So in the last slide, we hear about Yudhishthira Maharaj's lamentation. How Krishna, how when Kunti Devi had finished her prayers and Krishna is smiling and getting ready to leave, then Yudhishthira Maharaj comes forward and asks Krishna to stay back a few months. Now, it's interesting how Krishna does not stay back after Kunti's prayers, but he does stay back after Yudhishthira Maharaj besieged him, and that will come in the next chapter. But basically, Yudhishthira Maharaj is feeling great despondency because of the number of people who have been killed in the war. He feels himself responsible for that. He feels like because of his greed for power that so many people who have been killed and their families have been bereft of their association. So here I'll read a few verses to end the whole discussion here. King Yudhishthira said, "O my Lord, I am the most sinful man. Just see my heart, which is full of ignorance. This body, which is ultimately meant for others, has killed many, many phalanxes of men. I have killed many boys, brahmanas, well-wishers, parents, friends, preceptors, and brothers. Though I live millions of years, I will not be relieved from the hell that awaits me for all these sins. There is no sin for a king who kills for the right cause, who's engaged in maintaining his citizens, but this injunction is not applicable to me. I have killed many friends of women, and thus have caused enmity to such an extent that it is not possible to undo it by material welfare work. As it is not possible to filter muddy water through mud or purify a wine-stained pot with wine, it is not possible to counteract the killing of men by sacrificing animals." Because he had just finished the Ashwamedha Yagya. And so that's what he's referring to, is that, one cannot counteract these things through sacrifices. So I will finish my class here. And if there's a few extra slides that I have that can be points of discussion for the children that I've just added at the end of the slide. A nice point would be who should be protected. And that comes very early in the chapter, verse 5, who should be protected. And it forms a very basis of good discussion, why the brahmanas should be protected than the cows, women, children, old men. And Prabhupada explains that in the purport of verse 5. And then the next one would be, this is a deeper point that can be discussed with slightly older children. Why does really Krishna favor his devotee over others? And a very nice analogy of the sun and the judge is given here, that how the sun is impartial, it will shine everywhere. But if somebody, Prabhupada explains how if somebody closes all his doors and his blinds and everything and doesn't allow the sun come in, then the sun cannot give bestow that light and that warmth to that person, right? So Krishna's mercy is there for everyone. It depends who the recipient of that mercy is. People who turn their backs on Krishna, they don't get the mercy. People who demand, material things will get mercy accordingly. But pure devotees who want nothing, they get full mercy of the Krishna. And the last one is, how verse 20. I thought this is a very nice point for our children. Talking about when Krishna appears, what happens, everything becomes very auspicious. Okay, thank you very much, Radhika. And I just want to add that how beautiful the activities, how wonderful the activities on this chapter is. And Radhika and myself were discussing how the activities for this chapter are just very, 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 very wonderful and exhaustive, because literally it covers the entire chapter. All the prayers that I explained and recited here, they are all covered in these activities, and very well, in a very well executed, in a very well way. Yes, Radhika.
Thank you, Mataji, for that beautiful, detailed analysis of the chapter. This is one of my favorite chapters in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So once we have completed, discussing this chapter with our children, we're ready to move on to the comprehensive guide for young readers. Every chapter begins with a story summary. And I really liked how the story summary has been divided into two parts. Kind of makes the flow of the chapter, easy to understand for the child. And I also liked, there's a poem here, which is adapted from Kalakanta Prabhu's book, Bhagavad Purana, Pastimes of the Supreme Person. As Mother Kunti watched Krishna's wondrous act, she worried now he would leave and never again come back. Indeed, his splendid chariot stood ready to depart, so approaching her beloved Krishna, Kunti spoke her heart. So it's just very beautifully done. The story summary goes on. My dear Lord Krishna, she said gently, please don't go. I know you're everywhere, but no one can see this because you're invisible. Even seeing you here, this material world is like a curtain. Therefore, some people foolishly can't even see that you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, nice summary with the children. And then key messages. Myself as an adult reader of the Srimad Bhagavatam, I use these books to help me understand the key themes and messages that span across verses. Nice to have these multiple choice questions that help the child understand the format of the story. And I like to, especially in Sunday school, have A, B, and C, like 3 flashcards for every child. And then the child can, so there's not so much noise in the class, but a child can simply just raise the placard and share with me what the answer for that particular question is. So of course, this is to be used as a workbook, and the children go ahead and identify the answer right there in their workbook. And then higher thinking questions, whether you want to do it as part of the discussion directly from Prabhupada's book, when you're going through verse by verse, or if you want to assign these as a writing assignment to older children. Really thoughtful questions here. Why did Queen Kunti wish that all those calamities would happen again and again? And if Arjuna was convinced by Lord Krishna that the battle of Kurukshetra was necessary, how come Maharaj Yudhishthira was not convinced? Is it a matter of faith, or is it a matter of, what is the deeper purpose behind this? So some really nice questions given here to encourage some deeper thinking. And I think this is the chapter that has the most, resources at the end of the chapter. So this just has, like Mataji said, exhaustive resources. The activities cover such a broad range and such a broad spectrum, and really help to understand even the broader context of the Mahabharata. So I found this to be a very good foundation for studying the rest of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because Mahabharata stories come up so often in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a nice one where there are two resources given at the end of the chapter, one of which is spot the 5 differences between Lord Krishna's lotus feet, and a very nice opportunity to go into a discussion of the symbols on Lord Krishna's lotus feet. And then also matching the picture to the word to identify which particular symbol from Krishna's lotus feet is depicted here. And I just included an example from my son's book of where, they really enjoyed this one. They identified the differences, and then the picture to the word that describes the picture. This one is a nice one. All the calamities that Queen Kunti refers to briefly, and Prabhupada talks about in the pulpit, are provided in a picture or in an illustration form. And then the child is writing down, so a narrative of what calamity is being referred to. So the clues are these pictures, and then you describe what you remember, who was involved, and how Krishna helped. And, this amazing and totally incomprehensible prayer of Queen Kunti, like Mataji was saying, at the end of all of this, what does she want? Let the calamities happen over and over again. So really helping the child understand, look at the depth of the calamities that she went through. Her children there was attempted murder at every step. And then for her to pray that is just absolutely. So, from Gopinath's book. And he was much younger. Right now he's 10, but he wrote very briefly. And then I remember at that time, my younger son, Sri Jiva, was even younger. Verbally discussed with me. So again, ability to modify this, certainly an older child would be able to write more in terms of what that calamity was. This is a really nice activity that helps us understand the characters or the personalities in the Mahabharata and how they are related. And I liked how there are these rings, wedding rings in the center to symbolize that the person is married to this person. And there's a resource that the child can answer questions that help them then complete the pictorial representation of Queen Kunti's family tree. So how many children does Kunti have? Who's Krishna's sister? Who's Uttara married to? What are the names of the 5 Pandava brothers? And then by answering all these questions really gives them to complete that. So when we did this was an older version of the book, so it's split in 2 pages. What I showed you previously is the newer version, the reprinting, which all of these questions are fitted into 1 page. But here, my children answered, and then they filled in, and they filled it in pencil. So a little hard to see, but they filled in all the names of the personality family tree. And then there's an opportunity to understand your own family tree. And complete these boxes to write the name and the relationship, and then draw it out on this tree. And actually, what was really interesting was that some of the people in our family, we hadn't even discussed the names, like my grandparents. We hadn't even discussed, my children didn't even know the names of those people. They know the names of my parents. And they only know them as Nani and Dadi and Dada and Nana, but this really helped us kind of get deeper into, okay, what are the names and personalities, and then depict it in pictorial form in a tree. So, interesting exercise. Queen Kunti biography. Write a biography of Queen Kunti. A biography is a written account of the series of events that make up a person's life. So the first task that's encouraged is to research Queen Kunti's life in detail, and some prompts are given, and then to go ahead and write out the biography, add illustrations and a cover to make the biography complete. So this is a really nice activity, perhaps for older, but with younger children can and also very nice exercises that are working on the child's grammar and English language art abilities. This one talks about completing sentences given some sentence starters. So these sentence starters, Queen Kunti did not want Krishna to leave because, or Krishna came to this world because, and then some of the are not so much starters, but sentence enders. So right here, this one and this particular one, the last two on the screen, give more room in terms of, the starter is not given, but some part of the sentence is given, and the child can complete these sentences. So this is a nice activity to teach English from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And here's a nice, I find that young children enjoy comics and graphic novels a lot. So this is a very nice way where there are thought bubbles given or speech bubbles given around a picture of Queen Kunti, and trying to create a mind map of her prayers, because Queen Kunti's prayers, like Mataji was saying, are just so revered and loved by Prabhupada and by devotees and inspiring for all of us. So this is a really nice way for the child to remember, memorize, understand some of the prayers of Queen Kunti. And here's an example from my child's book. So he's filled out, you give devotional service to everyone. Your cooling lotus glance is like a fresh spring shower. Krishna, please stay. So this was just a beautiful chapter that together as a family at home. Unfortunately, I don't have pictures from Sunday school, but I've done this in the St. Louis Sunday School and the Chicago Sunday School. And I didn't always take pictures, so I don't have pictures to share from our Sunday school classes. This is a very fun activity about making a prayer book from Queen Kunti's. So there's a resource in the chapter that provides an idea for having 11 pages in this book, and the prayer that can go in every page or on every page, and then the children can do illustrations. In our homeschool co-op, Vaishnav Academy, and I printed out that sheet that has those 11 prayers, and then here's a child that cut them out. And then what we did is we did a little, we took tracing papers and we traced out many of the illustrations, and then we cut them and we put them in our book. So here's a child that is tracing, and here's a book on Srimad Bhagavatam that I have. And again, this child is tracing. And then somebody created the book. It's just a series of regular paper that you fold in half, and then you can either hole punch or you can staple and create a book out of it. Here's another child that is copying or tracing an image of Kunti and Pandu and the 5 young, and copying Krishna's lotus feet or a picture of Krishna. And then we put our book together. We kept it pretty simple. We have all our illustrations, and we have of the prayers and pages like this. And finally, we created a little border for our Queen Kunti prayer book. This was something that we really enjoyed, and I took a video while the children were working.
C-U-N. C, no way, how do you spell this? K-U. K-U-F-T. F-T. Just right here. Guys, this is a border. Border for some. Oh, that's cool. What are you doing? Wait, we're going to put it on the front cover. No. Like it or not? Front cover? It would not fit in the front cover. Look, it does not. Where's? Go move the table.
Okay. Let me go ahead and start that again. Another activity in the book to either go into a dictionary and look up these keywords, or even go further and write sentences using these words. It can be done orally if the child is younger, or in written form. And also, which children always enjoy, and nice words to find. I love the poems in every chapter. Prayers of Queen Kunti. Queen Kunti couldn't bear to see that her dearmost Krishna would leave. She loved him so very much that she prayed to him as such. May my love for you always be just like the Ganges flowing to the sea, strong and determined, never giving up, flowing to the ocean without any stop. Krishna smiled at Queen Kunti as Queen Kunti prayed. Forever in her heart, he promised he would stay. So very, very beautiful. We have several sheets of answers at the end of this chapter, just because there's so much to cover. And the books are available via Amazon in the US as well as United Kingdom. And also we are via Golden Age Media Publishing in India. So that's an overview of the exercises and activities related to this chapter in the book. All right, we'll open it up for our next section, which is questions and answers. Please feel free to use the Zoom tool to raise your hand, and you can ask your question yourself. I can unmute you. So, any questions? Or comments are welcome too. All right, we have Sakshi Mataji. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hare Krishna, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Mataji, actually this is not from this chapter, but from the third chapter of Canto 1. So there is a word they have used like Mahatva Tattva and the material indignants. So can you just tell me in brief, like what exactly it is?
Material indignance? I don't know.
Ingredients, material ingredients, and Mahatva Tattva.
Mahatattva.
Mahatattva. Yes.
Yeah, material ingredients. So this is the story of creation. This is the original substance that first appears when Krishna when he glances at material nature. Mahatattva is manifested, which is really is called the primordial soup, where all the time, which in combination with the three material modes of nature, when they all churn together, they create all these different elements, the 24 material elements. And this is all instigated by time, who is none other than Krishna. So the time is like the stirring soup, and when it combines with the modes of material nature, which is goodness, passion, and ignorance, these material things are created, and also the living entities. In other words, the living entities come under one of the three modes of nature. They're either in the mode of passion, goodness, or ignorance, or combination of two. So because then when they combine with the false ego, which is ahankar, which is thinking that I am this person, identity with the body, then that creates, and in combination with the different modes, creates a type of living entity. You see, when the false ego combines with the modes, it creates a certain certain living entity. But that doesn't happen without the glance of Krishna. So when Krishna, the spirit, matter cannot act without spirit. So the catalyst is Krishna. So when Krishna glances at material nature, Mahatattva is manifested, which is a combination. It's the creation in its most subtle form and its most subtle form, not manifested completely as yet. Okay,
Mataji. Mataji, I have 2 more questions. So can I ask now, or should I wait?
You sure can. No, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, in the same chapter, it is written in the translation like Krishna's second incarnation, third incarnation. So likewise, there are many incarnation they have written in the translation. But I did not get like what is the first incarnation?
Oh, I
Because
think,
from this.
yeah, the first incarnation I think is the four Kumaras, and this is the four
Okay.
Kumaras. You know, they are the first incarnation, and these are the Shakti Avesha avatars, you know, of the Lord. So the four Kumaras. Did you get it? I think it's
Okay.
explained over there, isn't it? They are the first
Okay.
ones.
So
Yes.
actually, yeah, actually, Mataji, they means in the translation, I think incarnation word is not used. So that was I was confused. Like, what is the first incarnation?
Yes.
Okay.
So the reason is because these are not really Vishnu Tattva. In other words, they are not Vishnu incarnations like we would have of Lord Ram, Nrsimhadev. These are
Okay.
expansions of Vishnu. They're non-different from Krishna. But these are Shakti Avesh Avatar, which is an empowered living entity who gets the potency of Krishna, who's infused with the particular potency of Krishna. In the case of Kumaras, they are infused with the potency for great scholarship, for learning. Okay,
Okay.
so
Okay.
these are actually empowered jivas, but they are also
Okay.
lit-
Howard Judas. Yes. Yes.
but they are also listed as incarnations because they are known as Shakti Avesh incarnations. In other words, they become so powerful because Krishna's potency is infused in them, in that particular area, that they become almost godlike. Okay, like for example, Buddha, Kumaras, Prithu Maharaj, these are all Shakti Avesh avatars. Okay.
Okay. Okay, Mataji. Yes. Yes. And Mataji, the third question is like the story summary which is there in your books. So should we read them with the children or means before the chapter reading or after the chapter reading? Means once the chapter is completed, should we take the story summary after that, or should we take it before reading? Before starting any new chapter.
Well, yeah, if the children are older, then you could do first from Srila Prabhupada's translations, book.
Mhm.
The children are
Okay.
very young and they cannot go through the verses. And I would do the summary, just the summary, and elaborate the summary through those activities. Okay, so depending on the age of the child. How
Okay.
old, yeah, how old are your children?
Okay. Okay, Mataji.
How old are your
Thank you.
children?
They are actually 8 to 12 years.
Oh, okay. Well, you could go through the Prabhupada's translation and have them take turns reading it and then discuss a few things, discuss certain points and of discussion points that I elaborated and in my class, like the first verse, with the mind map, how Krishna is the absolute truth and all his different features like that. So just a few things that you feel that it will be interesting for them, you can, discuss during that time. And there's some higher thinking questions also to help you with these discussion points because they are old enough to go through the translations with you. And then you would go to the summary, you would read to them the summary, and then you would try to do the activities. Okay. Now, when you go through the translations, you don't have to go to, very detail. Just for many verses, you just want to continue reading. But the first chapter is really interesting. Oh, this is the third chapter, right? You're talking about, yeah, yeah. That chapter is also very, very interesting. Because it lists all the incarnations. So yeah, and the guidebook will really help you because it gives all the details of the incarnations there for discussion. For discussion points.
Yes, yes, Mataji. And just one more thing I just want to share. In the last session, I just discussed some of the activities and the questions of the second chapter from your book, and the children really enjoyed it. So they were having some different sample. They really enjoyed the whole session.
Yeah.
That's what I want to share.
You mean the higher thinking questions of the second chapter? Yeah.
Yes, yes. So the activities and the higher thinking questions means every session, like in the session, I just included all the questions from your book, and they enjoyed the whole session.
Yeah. Yeah. Sri Radhika Mataji has been emphasizing higher thinking question that she regularly uses as points of discussion. So you definitely, it's a very good thing. Now, are you teaching your own children or other children as well?
Actually, I'm from Gita Mataji's group.
Oh, okay.
Gita Gopal Mataji.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, so this is a team of different teachers who are doing this. Very
Yes,
nice.
yes, ma'am.
Oh, so wonderful. And I believe you started from the Canto 1 now, right? Yes.
Yes, Mataji. Yes, we have completed 2 chapters, so we are starting with third chapter now. Yes,
So these sessions are helping you? These sessions are helping you to,
yes, a lot, Mataji.
yeah, wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
And also, just an additional resource to share regarding your second question about, which incarnation is first. I wanted to share at the back of the chapter, Mataji has included this really nice listing of all the incarnations, and there is a number, and the note says number indicates the place and appearance. So then the Kumaras are listed, and then there's a number 1, and then Varaha Dev is listed in number 2. So this might help you as you're preparing for the third chapter for your discussions with the children. All right. Dear friend Achinte Priyamataji from Orissa. Doesn't matter, it's a Friday, it's a Saturday, she's here every week. So please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
I wanted to ask, how can we explain to the children the topic of praying when they have a problem or they are in danger? Because we see in this chapter, Uttara, she was in danger and she prayed to Krishna. But at the same time, Prahlad, he was in danger, but he was remembering the Lord, but he was not praying for his protection. And you mentioned that Prabhupada also says that devotees, they don't pray for their protection, but the Lord protects them.
Mhm.
So I want to ask, how should we teach them if you have a problem? Should they pray to God, to Krishna, or should they have a surrendered attitude and leave it to Krishna's mercy and decision?
Yes. So we see that we have to act according to our level of advancement. So in our conditional state, we just cry out to Krishna, Even Kunti Devi, she's crying out to Krishna, right? So we just cry out. And this is how you tell the children that whenever you're in danger, cry out to Krishna, because we are not at that advanced stage where we don't do that, where we just, of course, Krishna knows that we need the help, but yet it's very good for us to cry out to Krishna. Krishna likes that relationship. It's more personal rather than, and not to go to him and to expect that, oh, Krishna knows everything. It's a little bit impersonal because we are not at that level. Prahlad, when he surrendered to Krishna, and he was in a very, very high platform, and so everybody is approaching Krishna in a different way, So we have to approach Krishna according to our own level of advancement. And definitely you should encourage the children to always cry out to Krishna. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you for your question. Archana Mataji from Phoenix, Arizona, also one of our loyal inspirations and joins us every week. Thank you, even though it's a Friday morning, not a Saturday morning for you. You joined us, Haribol.
Hare Krishna Mataji. So I have a question on, so in the previous chapter, Ashwatthama was punished by Arjuna, and then he lost his bodily luster, but still he was still like powerful enough to release the Brahmastra for the second time. Like, is that right? I mean, is my understanding correct? In spite of the punishment, he again, went ahead and gave the Brahmastra again. Wow.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. It did happen like that. They let him go and then he came back. I mean, I was thinking about the tolerance of the devotees, how how tolerant they were, that they still, they knew that Ashwatthama had done the most heinous crime, and he's coming back. But their business was really to surrender to Krishna. In other words, devotees don't see the act of the sinner, rather they see beyond that. They see how the modes are acting, and really it is Krishna who's sanctioning this. So they learn to surrender to Krishna rather. Just like for example, a good example would be like, if a snake bites you, bites me, then we are in pain and we try to quickly do something about it. but we don't get angry at the snake because that's his nature. That's his mode, right? You expect a snake to bite. Right? So in the same way, devotees see like that. They're not really revengeful towards the sinner. You know, they accept it like the modes, of course, but that doesn't mean justice is not done. You know, still there is justice, but they don't have any personal vendetta against that person, you know? So I see that more on that level. Now the question may be, why did they allow Ashwatthama to go free if he had to come back, right? That's a deeper question of why he was allowed. Well, because again, Krishna wants to teach us many things. He's multitasking, where he wants to teach us many, many things. He wants to show us the surrender of the devotees, especially drop these exalted qualities, you know, right? And Yudhishthir's, and even Yudhishthir was totally against killing of Ashwatthama, you know. So to glorify his devotees, Krishna also does that. He puts his devotees under such suffering, so much suffering, because he wants the world to see that his devotees are willing to go through anything for his sake, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Archana Mataji. From Detroit, Adi Gorangi Mataji, thank you for joining us on a Friday morning. Please ask your question.
Hare Krishna. Am I audible, Matajis?
Sure are.
Okay. Dandavat Pranam. I've never used these headphones. Usually my kids are using, so it's my first time. Thank you for a wonderful class, Arita Mataji, and thank you, Shiradika Mataji, for explaining all the wonderful resources for this chapter. I just had a question, wanted to clarify my understanding on this chapter. We understand that Queen Kunti does not want separation from Krishna and is offering all these prayers, but at the end you said that she did ask finally for him to sever the physical relationship, meaning she was okay letting him go to Dwarka and leave physically, knowing that in her mind she was going to be remembering him and have that relationship. I was confused, Mataji.
Oh yes, okay, yeah, all right. So she's asking for her relationship with the Vrishnis and the Pandavas to be severed, not her relationship with Krishna.
Okay.
So she's not asking that her relationship, that it's okay for Krishna to go. She's saying, no, don't go, just stay with me, you know. But she's torn. She's torn. She knows that if she keeps him, then her family members, she's related to Vrishnis as well. You know, she's got that was her mother's side, right? And then her father's side is her husband's side. No, sorry, her husband's side are the Pandavas, and Vrishnis are from her parental side. So a woman generally has affection for both sides of the family. She has affection for her parents' side, and she also has affection for her husband's family. So here we see her being torn, because she doesn't want Krishna to go. She definitely is not asking for severing her relationship with Krishna, definitely. But what she's torn about is that if she doesn't allow Krishna to go, then her family members in Dwarka will be bereft of the association of Krishna. Okay. And if she allows him to go, then the Pandavas are bereft. Her own children and herself are bereft of the association of Krishna. So she's saying, why don't you sever all this physical, connection that I have with my family members, which is giving me so much confusion. You know, and this is true, isn't it? Because we have so much affection for our family members, it's also a source of great suffering, because when they leave, it's so much, or something happens to them. It's a constant state of anxiety and which brings suffering, right? So that's the connection she wants Krishna to break.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, Mataji.
Yeah, not her connection with them, really, as spirit souls, as devotees of Krishna. She's not looking for that, because false renunciation is not what she's looking for. Because we're not Mayavadis where we say, okay, I disconnect myself from all material relationships. But then, no, we are asking for this material attachment, which is a source of anxiety for us, but we're looking for that attachment to Krishna and his devotees. And so all these family members, they are all devotees. So she is looking for that spiritual connection, but not the material connection that brings anxiety for her. Okay?
Yes, thank you, Mataji.
Her own connection with Krishna, she wants it firm. She says, may my attraction be for you just like the way Ganges flows towards the river, unstoppable, right? And the Ganga, if you go to the Himalayas and you see Ganga, at its source, the way she flows, I mean, literally, you could wash away a truck there. It's unstoppable, right? So she wants that her relationship with Krishna to be unstoppable. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Very helpful.
All right. Priya Mataji has another question.
Yes, Mataji, a follow-up to my question. I remember that Srila Prabhupada, he gives this example that in Second World War, the wives of the soldiers who went to war, they prayed to God that please protect our husbands, bring them safe home. And most of them did not come, so they lost faith in God and they became atheists. So also, how can we tell our children that sometimes bad things or Krishna chooses not to respond the way we pray to him when we are in danger or we have a problem?
So we have to teach them the idea, the concept that how whatever Krishna does is for always for good. He's all good. So whether he's putting us through difficulties or anybody, even a non-devotee through difficulty, is meant for his good. It's meant for him to learn something from it. Because Krishna is not bad, he's all good. So whatever he does, so in that way, maybe there's something they need to learn from that, maybe that misery was going to help them. Well, they became atheists after that, just like Gandhari, she reacted in a different way, and Draupadi reacted in a different way, Gandhari was very angry when all her sons were killed. Her 100 sons were killed. She was very angry and she cursed Krishna. So, but what good was that curse? It didn't help her. It didn't help her with her devotion to Krishna. But Draupadi, all her 5 children were killed, and she's saying she's forgiving Ashwatthama. And her surrender to Krishna becomes greater. So it depends on who takes what. So it's a loss. There's no gain in that. When one turns against Krishna, Krishna has nothing to lose, but they do have a lot to lose from that, because their faith is destroyed, in the Lord, who's really our own protector. Okay.
Thank you, Achintya Mataji. We have some nice appreciations coming in from devotees. And Amritanam Mataji from Greensboro is bringing our attention very beautifully to a part of the pulpit, and I wanted to read that. Prabhupada says, the highest goal of human civilization is to work hard under the guidance of the Lord and become completely dependent on him. And Prabhupada goes on to share just some amazing insights. So we're also enriched by Prabhupada bringing the Bhagavatam into our lives, and personally also our the lives of our families and our children. Want to invite Shyamarupini Mataji from Iowa to please ask her question. Thank you for joining us. Friday morning, not easy.
Yes, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji, for the wonderful session. Both of you, I'm really so grateful to both of you. I had a question Mataji, if kids are not so keen on, letting me explain things or discuss things, so can I just go through reading the translations and then, pay more attention to the activities and discuss through the activities rather than just, spending time and, trying to make them understand, ask questions?
These activities for this chapter, as you can see, they're so exhaustive that if you just did activities after reading the summary, it's totally fulfilling, So it's okay. I mean, because the reason why I do these classes is for our own enrichment also. Because when we get a taste for what, the chapter is about, and we go deep into the chapter, what we give to our children will naturally become richer. Okay. So, the children can do from the guidebook, but your own understanding of that chapter from Srila Prabhupada's book is still very important if you have time. Now, for those who don't have time, it's okay. Because you can see with those activities, even if you didn't have time and you just had no time to read, you still would be gaining, But if you have time, then, so I was thinking, okay, for those who don't have time, they can go directly to the activity and they can maybe hear this class, and they get some insight. It's like a it's a quick way of getting through the chapter, is to give additional help through these programs that we're doing, So that's the whole purpose. But you cannot give all of it to your children at one go, okay? And then you can give it through the activities. Totally okay. Totally, it's totally fine.
Okay.
That verse, Yena Tena Prakarena Mana Krishna, somehow or other, just attention to Krishna. And I like how Vaisheshika Prabhu, with his book distribution, he always says, the goal is leave them with a good impression, So as long as the child is getting this exciting experience of being with the Srimad Bhagavatam, whether they're, really delving into the philosophy and every chapter and every aspect. I'm going through third canto right now with my children, Kapila Dev, Sankhya, So, but like Mataji said, I totally second that. We just, whatever works with whatever chapter. And if it's just the activities for a particular chapter, they're all transcendental.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much.
So we're at 8:59. Any concluding comments, Mataji?
No, as usual, I'm very happy to be with all of you today, and look forward to our next class, which will be next Saturday, usual time, right? Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone, for joining and adjusting your schedule, even though we're doing it on a different day. And again, a lot of gratitude to Ardha Mataji for bringing Bhagavatam. I don't think, at least I would not have been thinking about reading it myself and teaching it to my children if it was not for her. And I do a discussion with my children and some others every morning from 9 to 10. So I'm going straight from here into my call, and we're on third canto, and we're on chapter 28. So we're going to really enjoy it. Thank you all. See you next Saturday. Hare Krishna.